From Italy with Love, How the Roman Empire Took to the Sea and My Italian-Born Dad Got His Odd Name. And yes, these topics are related. I'm going to start off by reading publicly for the first time, yes, you are my virginal test audience, 2 chapters from a forthcoming literary auto-fictional memoir titled Crazy Days, Confessions of a Fallen Altar Boy. What the heck is a literary auto-fictional memoir? Here's how I define it. I'm recounting true stories from my life, yet embellished with novelistic storytelling. Everything is true, except for what's not. And I also, as you will hear, when I get to the Roman Navy's first big sea battle, I'll also in places conjure up whole cloth a storified tale of actual history of how something might have gone down. In this case, the time the Roman Empire took to the seas to prove itself on water using some of the latest sea battle technology. So let us begin, shall we? We opened on a tri-level house in a leafy suburb north of Cincinnati called Forest Park, where I did a lot of my growing up and which was the launching pad that later landed me in West Virginia. But my family story, like yours to be sure, goes way, way further back than that. The cries. Somewhere in the house, the boy's father stormed and raged, room to room, minute after minute. What was it this time? Had one of the boy's sisters gotten home too late from a high school party in too tight jeans, her irises dilated with the latest fearsome drug which supposedly had infiltrated the daughter-filled suburbs? Or had his mother said something to set him off? "Do, you have to control yourself," which of course was the one thing to say to send him careening yet more out of control. Me? This house is out of control and I'm the one who should control himself? She called him Do when she really needed to get the attention of the handsome, hot-headed Italian man who had determinedly wooed and won her on the streets of Lorain, Ohio. Full name? Dulio Foster Imbrogno. Yet the Italian rendering of his name, still found on his birth certificate and World War II service papers and merchant marine documents, listed his name as Duilio Faustino Imbrogno with an extra I, and rolling R's when given its original Italian lilt. The Faustino, the Italian version of Foster, which was also found in the documents. The young man tensed his shoulders. There it was upstairs again, somewhere. His mother's sharp exhalation, a brief, strident burst of sound. Do! He always started with a string of exclamation points, this sharp monosyllabic cry, which seemed to appear and reverberate throughout the house almost weekly. Do! The boy gathered his bed covers to his neck in his basement bedroom. As usual, his younger brother seemed able to sleep through it all, yet maybe he was over there in the darkness on the room's other side, one eye cracked open, quivering like him, on edge. To distract his mind, the boy considered his father's odd Italian first name. In his 11 years of life, consuming hundreds of magazine articles and books at a steady clip, he had not ever once come across this name. Julio? Yes. Dulio? Never. Upstairs, a door opened. Another slammed with a thunderous clap, like when the ventilation in the house, wind entering one window, pressure equalizing elsewhere, crashed a door shut. The boy recalled a word discovered recently in some article or book. Scirocco. Scirocco. He loved the word's sound and the powerful wind it described. He sought out a fuller definition in the foot-thick dictionary at the back of his 5th grade classroom at Our Lady of the Rosary Elementary School. The definitions were evocative. After all, his father had been born right about in the center of the instep of Italy's boot. In southern Italy was one place where Sciroccos came to call, according to the dictionary. The boy had slipped open the rose-red cover of his latest journal to write down in blue ink highlights of the word's further meaning. Scirocco, a hot, humid south or southeast wind of southern Italy, Sicily, and the Mediterranean islands. Originating in the Sahara Desert as a dry, dusty wind, but becoming moist as it passes over the Mediterranean. This oppressive, relaxing wind is chiefly experienced in Italy, Malta, and Sicily. His father was indeed a Scirocco, yet what did it mean that a Scirocco could be both oppressive and relaxing? Upstairs, he noticed that things had grown quiet. In the space of silence that followed, his mind took off like a bottle rocket, thinking about Italy, the Roman Empire, heroes and enemies. Growing up, He had peppered his father for details about the family's Italian roots, hoping to hear some heroic, legendary detail by which to establish the family's specialness, maybe his own specialness. Do we have relatives who served in the Roman Empire? Are we related to Julius Caesar? Were any Roman legionaries or famous Italian warriors or generals named Imbrogno? But all they knew was that young Duilio Faustino had left for America with his family in 1929 at age 3. He had come through Ellis Island with his mother and 2 young brothers. The boy's father had no memories of his Italian boyhood. His dad's glancing facility with the Italian tongue would show mostly in how he rounded off phrases like pasta fagioli, prosciutto, and mozzarella with rolling Italian inflections, often while cooking his own Italian feasts in the kitchen. Pasta fagioli, prosciutto, mozzarella. We come from a long line of Italian peasants, I think, his dad would say, only half jokingly, when in calmer, better, sweeter moods. The young man was not satisfied. He read as much as he could about the Roman Empire, one of the most powerful and influential in all of human history, after all, and it was part of his direct bloodline. Rome's vast ambition and successes had utterly influenced the shape of a world he was just beginning to comprehend, even a score of centuries after its immense power had devolved into ruins, tourism, and so-called Italian restaurants serving bland spaghetti sauce, unlike his father's redolent sauce, which took 3 days to concoct. One day the young boy headed out the front door. He strode up the Waycross Road Hill to the red brick Forest Park Library, a favorite hideout just 10 minutes away on the other side of the intersection at the top of his climb. In the history section on a high shelf he needed a stool to reach, he found a military account of the Roman Empire. And there, by Jove, was the candidate Italian hero he had long sought. Gaius Duilius. The 3rd century BC Roman consul and general shared his father's own name, or a version of it, or maybe his father had been named for him, or maybe, what did the Hindus and Buddhists say about rebirths? Maybe his father had once been Gaius Duilius. The idea delighted him. This fellow, this warrior, had delivered the Roman Empire's first ever naval victory, the young man read. His eyes devoured the words, flipping through pages. Who knew the Roman Empire even had a navy? Yet Gaius Duilius was so famous that 3 ships of the Regia Marina, the old Italian Royal Navy, plus others in the present-day Italian Navy, had been christened in honor of the man. The boy wrote down the ship names in his journal. The Italian vessel Duilio was an ironclad warship launched in 1876. The Italian ship Duilio was an Andrea Doria-class battleship launched in 1913. The Italian vessel Ciao Duilio was an Andrea Doria-class helicopter cruiser launched in 1962. The Italian text beneath that photograph reads, L'incrociatore Ciao Duilio a Taranto durante una crociera addestrativa, which means the cruiser Ciao Duilio in Taranto during a training cruise. Taranto is a coastal city in southern Italy where there's a main Italian naval base. That evening in his basement bedroom, he pored over his journal notes. He pondered what he had learned of this historical figure who shared his father's oddball name. Maybe all of his yelling was left over from a former life. Maybe he had had to order his dad Roman legionaries about with loud declarations and even threats. The boy smiled at this ridiculous thought, which also had a weird charge of comfort to it, as if there were a good explanation, or at least an explanation, for the routine, endless, violently verbal tumult in his house growing up. His eyelids fluttered shut. He forced them open again, yet then they closed more conclusively. The journal slipped from his hand, its ruby-red cover flapping open onto the throw rug beside his bed. His head nestled into his pillow. The boy dreamed of Gaius Duilius. The Corvi. Gaius Duilius scanned the churning waters of the Tyrrhenian Sea as the hills of Sicily appeared on the lip of the horizon. A string of more than 100 battleships sailed behind his own. The fleet sailed steadily toward the former Athenian territory of Mylae, a spit of land jutting north into the sea. "Prepare the corvus!" he cried. His order was for his flagship, but was understood to mean all the ships so outfitted, and so the command passed ship to ship, deck to deck. Gaius Duilius commanded one of nearly 100 great quinqueremes, a warship battling with 90 oars to each side, manned with a detachment of nearly 100 legionaries. The Roman Senate had ordered the making of 125 quinqueremes and triremes. They were huge battleships, meant to counter the hegemony on the seas which until this day, under a hot Mediterranean sun in 260 BC, had been owned and effectively operated by Carthage. Rome, in fact, had never won a single battle at sea. Gaius Duilius knew that his reputation and career, his life too, possibly, were on the line should the Carthaginians triumph this day. After all, they had a similar number of ships, if not a few more. Their seasoned squadron was commanded by the capable Hannibal Gisco. Plus, they had the ineffable confidence from decades of successful war-making on open water, piloting faster ships than the Roman vessels, racing to confront their fleet. Faustus Sicorinus, a trusted officer of Gaius Duilius, a friend in the cutthroat world of intrigue in the newly constituted Roman navy, leaned two arms on the railing as oarsmen heaved the flagship towards the uncertain battle an hour away. It would be a sight to behold, more than 100 battleships meeting more than 100 battleships. "Do you think the corvus will do the trick?" said Sicorinus. Duilius eyed him. He raised his eyebrows in silent response to a remark that would amount to impertinence from any other sailor on the ship. "Sir," his friend quickly added. While Gaius Duilius was from a patrician family, he lacked a noble lineage which might be what bonded them. His friend's name, Sicorinus, meant person from the hillside. The two shared common roots in the Roman countryside, yet appearances must be kept, thought Gaius Duilius. Legionaries stood within earshot, arming themselves, preparing to battle upon the very decks of the legendary vessels of Carthage. Each and every one of the Romans knew they were meeting true masters of the sea. How would their upstart navy compete? With this in mind, they had outfitted their ships with an innovation dubbed a corvus, a Latin word that meant raven. Attached to the prow of the lead Roman ships, the device looked a bit like a looming bird. The corvus featured a plank 4 feet wide and 36 feet long that could be maneuvered by axle and pulley and swung onto the deck of a Carthaginian warship. On its underside, a heavy iron spike shaped like a bird's beak would puncture and anchor the plank in an opponent's vessel, connecting warship to warship. And while Carthage may have better sailors, Rome had its fearsome legionaries. They would pour across the planks of the corvi, which hung ready at the prow of ships in the Roman fleet's vanguard. "You think the legionaries can handle them, sir?" said Sicorinus. He nodded his chin to the flotilla of Carthaginian battleships now appearing by the dozens in the waters ahead of them. "For this trick," said Gaius Duilius, "our dear legionaries on this day are soldiers of the mare, of the sea. So we shall call our sea-borne infantry not what they are called upon land, but marinus instead. When they cross over the corvi, they shall decide our fate." Faustus Sicorinus nodded his head. He looked his friend up and down, wondering if either of them would survive the day. "You know what the Carthaginians do to commanders who fail utterly in major battles," he said. "I well know," said Gaius Duilius. He extended his arms wide, imitating a crucifixion victim. He dropped his arms, reached one comforting hand onto the hilt of his sword. "But today, my friend," said Gaius Duilius, "we shall seek to notch the first victory upon the seas for Rome. It is our day, not theirs." The Carthaginians, feeling perhaps overconfident, who were these land larvae Romans to challenge them on the high seas, broke formation as the fleets closed. In short order, 30 Roman quinqueremes unfurled their corvi. With loud clomps, they spiked an equal number of ships from Carthage, including the flagship of Hannibal Gisco. Hundreds of legionaries, marinus, Gaius Duilius corrected himself, eyeballing the operation from his lead vessel, scrabbled aboard the planks, swords and pikes upraised, loud cries pouring from their lips. He tracked Faustus Sicorinus crossing over to Hannibal's ship, lost sight of him in the clang, the roar, and crash of the battle. It all ended more quickly than anyone could ever have suspected. Gaius Duilius knew the day belonged to Rome when a cry went up from his own flagship. "Look there!" cried an officer. "The rat Hannibal Gisco flees like the vermin he is." And so it was true. Surrounded by a smattering of officers, Hannibal Gisco fled his overwhelmed flagship in a skiff, heading for a Carthaginian ship free from the wretched corvi. A handful of oarsmen heaved desperately in retreat across the waves, which were peppered with men. The living ones splashed in terror, the dead floated like logs. The remaining Carthaginian ships broke off, piloting faster vessels than the Romans. The ships that had not been pinioned by corvi were able to escape. The achievements that day by Gaius Duilius and his Marinus, who would pass forward the word marines in centuries to come, became the legend of the Battle of Mylae, later recorded in stone on a victory column in the Forum in Rome. So his triumph was heralded in the very pith and seat of the Roman Empire. It was indeed a proclamation to the world and to history. Rome not only commanded vast tracts of land from Romania to Britain, its empire now extended onto the high seas and surging ocean. As an older man, reliving past glories, the old naval hero would sometimes stroll to the Forum with a young companion. He liked to run his fingers over the numbers carved into stone in the Forum. Gaius Duilius, the column recounted, captured 31 ships of Carthage that day off the Sicilian shore, sunk 13 others, and amassed gold and silver worth at least 2,100,000 sesterces, the silver coin by which value was measured in the empire. That was me, Gaius Duilius thought, hand caressing nubby stone. A young voice beside him piped up. "How much was 2,100,000 sesterces, grandfather?" His 10-year-old grandson looked up at the old man. At this late stage in life, the aged warrior had a stoop to his once tall frame. He looked back at the pillar, then returned his eyes to the boy. "Well, back then, a loaf of bread cost roughly half a sesterce, and a decent flagon of wine maybe 1 sesterce," he said. He lifted the boy's own hand so that he might run his fingers over the numbers and Latin inscriptions on the column. "These days, a tunic will cost you 15 sesterces and a donkey 500. You want to buy a slave to work your farm? That will cost you maybe 6,000 sesterces, my dear Faustus." The boy hung on his every word. His grandfather was a great and famous man. When he went out at night into the streets of Rome, the Senate had decreed that he be accompanied by a torchman and a flutist, if he wished, that is to say. The boy knew that his grandfather often declined music for his evening strolls, although the old hero, led by a torchman, was a legend among the boy's friends, who would sneak out of their homes just to be part of this flaming troop. Gaius Duilius looked back down at his grandson. Yet he was at that very moment staring deeply into his past. His good friend had died that day off the coast of Mylae. "My dear Faustus Sicorinus." It was a phrase that might well up at will at the slightest tug of an old man's memory. He would not wish the boy or passers-by to witness the great figure. Was he great? He often did not feel great. Wipe at one eye, so he turned away as if to look back at the Forum. Yet in one small way, Faustus Sicorinus lived on, at least a little bit, every time Gaius Duilius walked with this dear youth through the storied streets of Rome. Addendums. So in the fall of 2003, my older brother David and I traveled to Italy along with our Italian aunts, Teresa and Loretta, my dad's younger sisters who were born in America and who adored him. The goal was first to meet family we still have in the Calabrian town of Rende, and from there head up into the hills and visit the house where my father was born, on a hillside where generations of my family had lived and died. My father was born on September 21st, 1925, in a stone house on a steep hillside below the mountaintop commune of San Pietro in Guarano in the southern Italian province of Cosenza in Calabria, Italy. The village of San Pietro in Guarano, the town named on my father's birth certificate, was barely visible in the high hills that ring Rende. The town appeared only as a small tan smudge up in the green hills, as seen from the balcony of a relative's fifth-floor apartment. After pointing it out, a relative, his name was Vittorio, used scissors to snip off a few of the small red peppers he grew in a pot on that balcony. They added a spicy kick to that evening's homemade pasta made by his wife, our great-aunt Teresa. The hillside where my father, christened Duilio Faustino Imbrogno, was born and our Italian forebears lived for generations, was a short drive downhill from San Pietro in Guarano, or a longer donkey trot. I came home with a rusty donkey or mule horseshoe found in the tall grass beside the house where we think my father was born. As I mentioned, no less than 4 Italian battleships have been christened the Duilio, including the World War I battleship Gaius Duilius, named after Gaius, up to the Italian destroyer Gaius Duilius, commissioned in 2009. I had to smile when my web research turned up these facts, given the many household battles I experienced growing up. Speaking of battles. In fact, however, I believe my father was not named after any of these battleships, but perhaps after the SS Duilio, the first Italian super-ocean liner, which made its maiden voyage October 29, 1923, from Naples to New York. This makes sense, as Naples is about a 3-hour drive northeast of the hillside where my dad was born. The name of Italy's greatest ocean-going vessel of the time, its Queen Mary, you might say, must have made its way into the Calabrian heartland, making itself known to my grandparents, Eugenio and Caterina Napoli Imbrogno, or maybe they just liked the sound of this not uncommon Italian boy's name, at least in Italy. Standing on that hillside in fall 2003 was quite the moment. The steep hill was fragrant with licorice-scented wild fennel run riot, and banks of sweet-smelling wild pink roses. Looking up, a grove of olive trees encircled the ridgeline. The hill was dotted from top to bottom with 3 old stone family houses. Caterina Napoli was born and lived in the uppermost house. Her forebears and my ancient ancestors, Michela and Luisa Nigro Napoli, lived in the middle house. This is a shot of me standing inside the house in what was, we assume, a wine-making vat. Eugenio Imbrogno's family moved into the house at bottom after his service as a communications officer in the Italian army in World War I. My future grandparents must have met in the middle of that hill. We're not entirely certain which house their black-haired third son was born. We're pretty sure the lower one. But when they cast about for a name, they in effect looked out at sea. And like the many ships that bore his name, young Duilio would soon float off across the water from the port of Naples, Italy. My future grandpa Eugenio, like many Italian men of his day, first went alone to America in 1922 at the age of 24 to find a foothold for his family in the New World. Grandpa Gene, as we grandchildren would come to call him, found that foothold on the shores of Lake Erie in Lorain, Ohio. He first worked in the steel mills, and then in his early 50s launched the Imbrogno Standard Oil's Ohio service station, to which he devoted his hard-working life. The gas station, which my father would help to build as an immigrant youth along with his brothers, would be the engine that powered the family's growth. After first finding work in those steel mills, Eugenio summoned his family from the old country. I have a copy of my dad's certificate of citizenship that says he formally entered the country and became a citizen of the United States of America on September 9, 1929. That means that my future grandmother, at the tender age of 30, gathered up the couple's 3 boys, Luigi, 7, Eduardo, 6, and Duilio, 3, and then headed off by herself with them for Naples. That was the point of departure for so many southern Italians seeking new lives, in passenger ships that routinely packed thousands of people on board. Across the choppy Atlantic, the 4 of them sailed that September, in a passage that took about 9 days. The family was poor. I can't imagine she spoke any English. The trip was likely not terribly comfortable. The nights doubtless endured below deck in cramped steerage with pots and pans for bathroom facilities, while wealthier passengers travel on the upper decks. I recall what another son of Italy, my Uncle Bob, my grandparents' last-born child in America, once said of the breed's transatlantic toughness. "Italians are made of nails." That's him, pointing, as he often pointed, along with my father, my Uncle Ed, Uncle Bob, Uncle Louie, and Grandpa Gene. My dad, his brothers, and my future grandmother came over on a liner called the SS Conte Grande, capable of carrying nearly 8,000 passengers. I try and conjure an image of young Duilio, his two brothers and their mother, arriving in New York Harbor that September day in 1929. I see a 3-year-old Italian hillbilly kid peering through a railing, staring in absolute wonder at the Statue of Liberty as America hove into view. And through many twists, turns, births, detours, dead ends, restarts, and further developments, that is how you ended up with me, Douglas John Imbrogno, the Imbrogno, sitting before you in the state of West Virginia in October 2025. There's a favorite line by David Byrne from the Talking Heads song Once in a Lifetime that I like. "How did I get here?" Well, now you know. If you'd like to keep up with my writing and the release of my Crazy Days Confessions of a Fallen Altar Boy book next year, knock on something, free subscribe to my website, westvirginiaville.substack.com, and you'll hear notice of it as well as other chapters from it. Thank you.